Okay, so in this segment, we're going to talk a little about meditation. This is not a how to meditate course, and if it were, I wouldn't be the most qualified to teach it by a long shot. But I did want to give both those of you who have meditated and those of you who haven't some sense for the varieties of meditation and meditative experience that are available, and in particular, how they connect to themes in Buddhist thought and in this course. Now, if you've never meditated, you may have the idea that meditation is this really hard thing. You've got to master this technique and practice. And you know what? You may actually be right. I mean, different people are different. Some people it comes very easily to, not to me. I actually had meditated a number of times without feeling that it was sufficiently rewarding to sustain a practice. I finally went with kind of total immersion and went to a 1-week silent meditation retreat. And at that point, meditation became kind of accessible to me, you might say. Even then, it took a lot of work. But again, your mileage may vary. And moreover, there are some things you can do, some kind of shortcuts you can try to take to at least get a sense for what meditation may have to offer. Now, one of these came up in a conversation I recently had with Shinzen Young, and I'll show you a little bit of that conversation. Shinzen Young is an example of one of these Western Buddhists I've talked about. In fact, he was kind of a pioneer in Western Buddhism. I think it was more than 40 years ago that, having left America, he became ordained as a Buddhist monk in Japan, and then he came back and became a teacher of meditation. And he's kind of got his own system of teaching meditation. He might not call himself in every respect an orthodox Buddhist, I don't know, but his teaching is very much grounded in a Buddhist sensibility. So in this part of the conversation, we start out talking about something that was alluded to in Lecture 1, which is how meditation can change your view of your feelings.
When meditation works, it gives you a skill set that allows you to experience physical and emotional discomfort with greater poignancy, but less problem.
So by greater poignancy, you almost mean you actually perceive it more acutely in a sense, but it causes you less trouble? What do you mean by...
That's exactly what I mean.
Okay.
So you learn how to escape into discomfort. There's 2 ways to deal with discomfort. Escape from it. If you can, great. But what if you can't? Well, if you can't, it's good to have in your quiver of life arrows, so to speak, the ability to escape into it. Then you sort of have your cake and eat it too. You experience the richness of being human, and part of that is uncomfortable. But the sense of problem, the sense of suffering is diminished. So now how that takes place, well, that's at least an hour talk.
It is, although can I interrupt you and just mention one little kind of exercise I've suggested to people as a shortcut to getting the idea that I think sometimes actually works. What I've said is when you're feeling really sad, and these are people who haven't necessarily meditated at all, when you're just feeling sad on the border of depressed, sit down, close your eyes, and just try to accept it, and just say, bring it on. What does sadness feel like? Pay attention to it. Just accept it. Just close your eyes and examine the feeling of sadness. Get closer to it. And some of them do report, although they haven't meditated, that oddly they do sense some of the kind of diminishing of the suffering. And you know what I mean?
Well, I totally.
Of course you do.
However, I would just slightly disagree and say those people, in fact, have meditated.
Okay.
You just gave them the essence of meditation.
Right.
Remember, you don't have to have your eyes closed and be sitting on the floor. What did you have them do? You had them focus on the discomfort. You had them try to be precise about the discomfort. And you had them try to not fight with the discomfort.
So meditation could be as easy for you as 1, 2, 3, could be. But I do want to add one asterisk to that conversation. Shinzen said, meditation doesn't have to be about sitting down and closing your eyes. That's true. And for example, you can find yourself in line at a store. You're getting frustrated because the person in front of you is taking so long. Why didn't they remember to take their credit card out before they got to the cash register? And then you can just decide to look at this feeling of irritation and observe it, and then it loses its power over you and kind of dissolves. That can happen. But I do think that mainly happens with people who are doing a regular meditative practice, meditating so regularly that they can then carry the practice into their everyday lives. Okay, so as for kinds of meditative practices, well, for starters, there are different kinds of meditation associated with different Buddhist traditions. So for example, Tibetan Buddhists, when they meditate, often do a lot of visualizing of images. Zen Buddhists may meditate on these koans, these cryptic or paradoxical sayings or questions. And sometimes Zen Buddhists actually do meditate with their eyes open, sitting down, kind of looking at a wall or something. In Vipassana meditation, which is particularly common in Southeast Asia, there's a lot of emphasis on observing the workings of your mind. So there are a lot of different traditions. There are stereotypes about the people who practice the tradition. So I heard once, Tibetan meditation is for artists, Zen is for poets, Vipassana is for psychologists. But I do think ultimately these traditions have more in common than they have differences among them. I think, for example, observing your own mind is to some extent something that winds up happening in almost any tradition, even if it is a more explicit goal in Vipassana meditation. And in general, I have found in talking to people from different traditions, when I talk to really serious meditators, by which I mean people who have meditated a lot more than I have, I find that they're talking the same language. When they're talking about the most profound experiences they've had, they tend to be grounded in Buddhist doctrine and related to the Buddhist teaching. So I think maybe more useful than covering all the varieties of meditation associated with different Buddhist traditions is to look at two basic kinds of meditation, both of which are often found within a single tradition. And these are the two types that are pointed to by those final factors in the Eightfold Path that we looked at in the previous segment. That is right mindfulness and right concentration. Those are two kinds of meditation. Now, concentration meditation involves focusing on something very intently. It could be a mantra, could be your breath, your breathing, could be a visual image, and you focus on it very single-mindedly, get absorbed in it. And this kind of meditation is said to bring great serenity, even bliss. And in fact, I can attest to the bliss. One thing that happened during my first meditation retreat was like day 4 or day 5, I was focused on my breath, breath after breath, and that was something I had had a lot of trouble doing at the beginning of the retreat, but I got really absorbed in it. And I suddenly just entered this state that can only be described as blissful. And there was a lot of powerful visual stuff going on. And I mean, I just remember thinking, this must be what heroin is like. I mean, it was an amazing feeling. And so I was like very proud of myself. I thought I'd finally arrived as a meditator. So I arranged to talk to one of the teachers after the meditation retreat. And so I had this little session with him, and I described the thing, to him, and I thought he was going to give me a medal or something. I don't know. I guess I didn't think that I had attained nirvana, but I thought I had done, gotten to some kind of higher plane. And he said, well, sounds nice. And then he said, but don't get attached to it. And what he meant, first of all, he's being a good Buddhist and reminding me, don't get too attached to any pleasure. But secondly, this was a retreat in the Vipassana tradition, which means it was about mindfulness meditation the second of these two kinds of meditation, it wasn't fundamentally about concentration or attaining bliss or anything else. We were supposed to use meditation to observe things mindfully. Okay? You could use and should use concentration techniques to get to a point where your mind is kind of stable and calm enough to do the mindfulness meditation, but that's it. I should have gotten off that rocket ship, at some lower level than I did. So what is mindfulness meditation? Well, it consists of observing anything in your realm of experience, your own mind, your own feelings, anything you can feel, sounds you hear while meditating, and if you're carrying it into everyday life, it can be things you see. But it involves observing these things in a kind of unusual way, in a special way. And you saw some of this in that conversation with Shenzhen Yang, in the way he talked about viewing unpleasant feelings. Normally, your relationship to a feeling like anxiety is, first of all, you don't like it, and second of all, it is controlling your thinking. So, for example, you may be sitting there going, I'm going to screw up that presentation tomorrow, or you may be doing the counter narrative and saying, well, it'll be okay because there's probably nobody in the audience who really matters that much anyway. But either way, the anxiety is controlling what you think about. And it's kind of ironic, here you've got this feeling that you really don't approve of, you don't like, and yet you're letting it control your thoughts. Well, as you may have gleaned from the conversation with Shenzhen, with mindfulness meditation, you are observing, in this case a feeling, without like or dislike. That's the idea, without judging it, so to speak. You're observing it, kind of objectively. And as a result, it doesn't control your thoughts. Now, when you think about it, this is kind of an unnatural thing to do, because after all, feelings were designed by natural selection to influence our thought and perception. We already saw a little of that in lecture 1, the way fear can influence what you literally see. And that is very much what feelings are about from natural selection's point of view. They're supposed to help govern our behavior and our thoughts and our perception. So to try to turn the tables in this way and look at feelings in a way that can disempower them is really quite a striking thing to do. And very unnatural, and it's very much kind of a violation of natural selection's agenda in a certain sense. And this came through in a description of mindfulness meditation that I heard not long ago when I was listening to a lecture from Bhikkhu Bodhi, whom you may remember from our previous segment. These are lectures he actually delivered quite a while ago, but they are available online. And here's what he said about mindfulness. He said, ordinarily the faculty of attention is used as an instrument for serving our purposes, our biological and psychological needs. But mindfulness is a kind of attention which operates independently of all ulterior aims and purposes. I like that idea of, talking about our basic biological and psychological needs as ulterior, as in some sense kind of illegitimate, whereas from natural selection's point of view, no, these are the central valid governing things of your life. This should determine everything you see about the world. And he's kind of wanting to cast them aside. He goes on to say, mindfulness is attention that functions in an atmosphere of detachment. It's attention that aspires towards a pure objectivity, an awareness which reflects the nature of objects exactly as they are, without adding to them, without elaborating upon them, without interpreting them through the screens of subjective evaluation and commentary. So the idea is that the mind as it ordinarily works and is designed to work is not a reliable instrument of perception and of thought. Now, I agree with that. I believe that the human mind as it naturally works is not necessarily a reliable way of looking at the world in the most truthful way possible, and we'll be hearing more of that theme. But I do want to pause now and just emphasize what a radical reorientation mindfulness is. Mindfulness, I think, has this reputation for being this kind of gentle thing, you eat mindfully, You go through life mindfully and appreciate the beauty of life. And that's actually all true. That's possible. But at the same time, there's a kind of edge to mindfulness because it does constitute a kind of rebellion against the agenda of natural selection. It's not the way we're designed to work. Now, in the next segment, we're going to hear a little more about that. We're going to talk more about mindfulness and flesh it out. And we're also going to talk about, mindful eating and things like that. And we're going to look at what is going on, according to science, in the brains of people who do mindfulness meditation and, for that matter, other forms of meditation.